Okay, this video is filmed in February 2026, a cancer update, new information, and I'm just going to tell you the truth about stuff. So some of you might find this very offensive. That's too bad. This is really for Smart Channel, kind of like for aristocratic intellectual people. This is not for average dummies. If you consider yourself normal, then you're stupid, so go away. Okay, this is for smart people who want to learn to understand cancer. The typical cancer patient just goes into the system, is given chemotherapy, and then they have a really crappy outcome. Okay, chemotherapy has been shown to help about 5% of patients increase their 5-year survival after metastatic disease. So there's some cancers it works well for, and you want to find out if it works well for your cancer, then go ahead and go down that path. But don't immediately take that path, okay? Because the average stupid person just says, well, I'll do what my doctor says. They're the cancer specialist. And you don't understand. Their job is to follow the protocol. You don't matter. I've never in my life seen a Western hospital that follows outcomes. No one follows outcomes. Their allegiance is not to you. They have to do what the protocol says in order to get paid, in order to not get sued. What happens to you does not matter. The patient is irrelevant, okay? There are requirements for getting paid to meet the criteria of a billing code. There are requirements to meet criteria for standard of care so you don't get sued. That's what matters, okay? What happens to the patient is not followed. It's not judged. It's not measured. If you have an athlete who, let's say he's a sprinter, you say, how fast can you run the 100-yard dash? If you have a wrestler, a boxer, MMA guy, what's your win-loss record? Baseball player, what's your batting average? Okay, you keep track of how performance is done. That is not done in Western medicine. Okay, I've never heard of such a thing, that a Western medical system would keep track of outcomes. And the answer is obvious. Why? Because if you kept track of outcomes, somebody would come along with a low-fat vegan diet and they would have the best outcomes by far. So the only way to avoid that happening is no one keeps track of outcomes that I'm aware of. Okay? So I'm just telling you that's how it is. So the typical person who gets chemo, I used to feel all sorry for them when I was a young guy. I'm like, oh, poor patient, they got chemo, they're going to lose their hair, they're going to vomit, all these sad things. Isn't it sad? Now I say to myself, lazy, stupid person probably didn't even read about their disease. Just wants a doctor to take care of them. A smart person says, what can I do to help myself? I started seeing things like this when I was getting farther along in my training. There was this really smart guy from University of Chicago, and he had cancer, and he refused all treatment. He just went home. And I don't know how he did, but this guy was super smart. He was sort of a world-famous published author in a lot of cancer stuff, and he decided, and I don't even remember what type of cancer he has, but I remember at the time being kind of shocked that he didn't want anything to do with the system. He just was going to go home. He said, whatever happens, happens. Okay? And that was a high-level guy. Okay? All right. Now, the other thing I want to tell you is that conventional medicine is not based on Christianity. It's not based on what I would call Catholic science. Okay? And I consider Catholic science a million times better than I do atheistic science. Because what happens is with Catholicism and Christianity, you're obligated to tell the truth, okay? So, the average dummy or liar will tell you, oh, you don't need religion for science and medicine. That's not true. You have to have Bible ethics, Christian ethics. Otherwise, everything becomes a joke. What I mean by everything becomes a joke is the big corporations are so rich. They're rich beyond belief of a regular person. They have $1 billion, okay? They can just buy the journals, buy the scientists. They can publish whatever they want. It doesn't have to be true. 80% of cancer research studies are not reproducible, meaning that they're not true, okay? So most of the information in journals is not true. That's an important point. If a researcher does not make the drug look good, they will not get repeat funding. And if they don't get funding, they can't publish enough papers to get promoted, to get tenure. So they have to kiss the drug company's butt. There's no way around it. And that's why so many of these drug company-based studies, they're a joke, okay? And then also, this idea that humans are just talking monkeys, I find it offensive. They say that humans just evolved from chimpanzees or a common ancestor. I was an A+ student in evolutionary biology at Stanford. I don't believe it. I think we're made in the image of God. And I say that based on extensive study of the science. Now, my ex-wife's family, they might have evolved from a common ancestor with chimps, but my family, it was created in the image of God, okay? There's a lot of differences between ourselves and chimps, okay? Now ask yourself, would you sleep with one of these two? I don't think so, okay? You know, if you have two twins, okay, they're not completely the same. The idea that we're 99% like a chimp is ridiculous. There's more than 150 million DNA differences, okay? And there's a heck of a lot of regulatory DNA differences. And I won't go much further with it, but the relevance of this, you know, atheistic Darwinism story that we're like chimps is in order to take away your natural rights, your intrinsic right, your value as a human being, the idea that you're part divine, you're not just like a monkey. You know, there's more to us than just the ability to have speech, okay? So that's relevant because a system that says that you're just a talking monkey has no obligation to you whatsoever. None, zero. You have no natural rights. You're not divine, okay? Versus a Christian system says, Jesus Christus, that what you do to least of my brethren, you do unto me. Thou shalt not lie is one of the 10 commandments. So you're obligated to tell the truth. You're obligated that, you know, someday you're going to have to answer before Jesus Christus at the last judgment. So, you know, you better be good. You better not pout. You better not shout, okay? When Santa Claus comes to town, you want to have the goods and say, I was good. I did what I was supposed to. I didn't lie to all these poor, pathetic patients, all these poor, pathetic people. I tried to help them, okay? Rather than just say, I was just following orders. I did the standard protocol. I did the standard protocol. Okay, that's what we're obligated to do now, doctors. I followed the standard protocol. Standard protocol is written at some Ivy League, big shot medical center, you know, based on kissing the drug company's butt. Sometimes it's the right thing to do. It's very good for a lot of acute problems. It's really good for some end-of-the-line problems, you know, kidney transplant, put the patient on a dialysis machine. But a lot of these chronic problems at the early and intermediate phase, it's not so good. Okay, so here is, you know, man created in the image of God, like Genesis 1:27, okay? Therefore, he's part divine. All right, a little bit about what can you control, what can't you control. I'm going to go through a whole bunch of stuff, some new books, and what I recommend, what I would do if it was me with cancer, okay? And by the way, this is just your educational video. I'm not your doctor. And then why am I making this video? I'll tell you why. Because I was just informed today that a good friend of a friend has cancer, and it's a female who's kind of shy. And a lot of these women are shy and insecure. And so and it's not just women, but men too. And they just say, well, I'm going to go to my doctor. It's a specialist, okay? And I always laugh when I hear that, okay? People think doctors are so smart. Well, you don't understand that doctors in the United States are very poorly educated. Their education is a disgrace. It is an embarrassment, okay? So I know how the average person thinks, oh, no, I know a pre-med, that kid was so smart. And I got news for you. Some of them have high IQs, but they're very poorly educated. For example, pre-med, they have to take calculus. What is the carryover between calculus and clinical medicine? It's 0%. It's a waste of time. Okay, it's just a filter, okay, to weed out people from pre-med. What is the carryover from physics to clinical medicine? Less than 1%. Even from biology class, undergraduate biology class, I would say about a 15 to 20% carryover. Organic chemistry, less than 5%, okay? So most of their pre-med education is completely irrelevant. Most of their med school education is just baby talk. They memorize a lot of detailed stuff. The 10th manifestation of a rare disease. Whoop-de-doo. But they don't know what to do to help you with a common disease. Okay? All right. So there's some things you can't control. You can't control your genetics. You can't control toxins you were exposed to in utero in your previous earlier days of your life. You can't control aging. You can't control, you know, things like your water is poisoned with rat poison with fluoride. Okay? But you can filter it. Actually, you can control that. You can partially control, you know, your ability to sleep, to handle your stress, to avoid toxins. We're going to talk about that. And there's things you can totally control. You can totally control your diet, and you're going to want to do that. Okay, we're going to talk about how to do that. Okay, and I'm going to go through way more detail than what's on this slide. We got to get through a little more basic stuff. This is a slide. This is going to be the final slide. I'll even take myself off. You can print screen that. I'm going to go through all of this stuff. And I guarantee you never heard it before unless you've seen my videos. It's more advanced than anyone else on the internet. And again, I'm not your doctor. I'm just teaching you to educate you. And I'm just making this video for a friend of a friend, okay? Anybody else who watches this video, I hope you learned something from it, okay? But, I'm Peter Rogers, MD, the Spartan vegan, best doctor in the world, even though everybody hates me because I tell the truth and I'm Christian, okay? And, the truth is verboten, okay? And Christians are being genocided, so, everybody hates Christians and wants to get rid of them. But, too bad, I'm still the best doctor in the world. Okay, so anyways, we're going to come back to this. I have to give you some background slides so you'll know what's going on, okay? Now, the first question is, do you really have cancer? Okay, because a lot of people go through screening studies and they're told they have cancer, but what they really have is a turtle. Okay, the majority of cancers are turtles. There's three basic categories of cancers. First of all, there's a vulture. Vultures are super rare. A vulture is so rare, it's just going to kill the patient like that, and there's really nothing you can do. Okay, and the way to get the picture of this is, imagine you're a farmer and you own this giant farm, like 100 square miles, perimeter fence. In the center is an animal enclosure. Inside that enclosure, you have a vulture, a rabbit, and a turtle. Okay, a couple of vultures, rabbits, and turtles. Now, if somebody leaves the window open on the animal enclosure, the vulture is going to fly over the fence. There's nothing you can do. You can't screen for it. It'll happen between screening intervals, and it will kill the patient. Super rare, but when it happens, the patient's dead. There's nothing anybody can do. But those are so rare. Make a movie about them. I can't even think of the last time I saw a vulture, so you can kind of forget about those. Okay, the next category of cancers is the rabbit. So imagine the rabbit's in the central animal enclosure, and it digs underneath the enclosure, and it gets out. Now the rabbit's going to make a run for the fence. That's what everyone thinks cancer is. The rabbit's on the loose. The rabbit's on the run. We got to stop him. Surgery, radiation therapy, chemo, stop the rabbit, okay? And some cancers are rabbits, okay, sure. But a lot of cancers are turtles. And so even if you left the door open on the central enclosure, and that turtle starts walking for the fence, it's going to take that turtle. You could go on vacation for 6 months and come back, and that turtle will not have made hardly any progress, okay? So what I'm saying here is, you might have a turtle. Make sure you're not dealing with a turtle before you give chemotherapy, because a lot of patients will get chemotherapy for a turtle, and they're going to die from the chemotherapy, when if they just would have left the turtle alone, they would have died of something else. So you want to be sure you got a rabbit and not a turtle before you come chasing it with major surgery, major chemotherapy, major radiation therapy, okay? Believe me. And by the way, not to brag, but just so you know my credentials, I graduated first in my medical school class. I did a surgical internship. I did a diagnostic radiology residency. I did an imaging-guided surgery interventional radiology fellowship. I then also did a neuroradiology fellowship, half a neurointerventional fellowship. I have been a doctor over 35 years, an MD, and I have done thousands of biopsies of cancer patients or potential cancer patients, and I have attended thousands of cancer conferences or lectures on cancer. I got a lot of experience with cancer, okay? And a lot of people have consulted me. And again, speak with your own doctor, go to your own doctor. I'm just talking to my friend here. I'm not your doctor. This is not medical advice. This is just an educational video, okay? Now, and I don't do telehealth, so I'm not your doctor. Don't expect me to answer your cancer questions. All right. The way you can think of cancer is like trench warfare, okay? You got stem cells in the center, and these are the ones that really kill people, okay? And then they release chemicals, and they cause the surrounding cells to help them out. But it's really the cancer cells. They're the badasses, okay? They have a lot of plasma membrane pumps, and often you give chemo, and the cancer stem cells just pump the chemo out. And you can give chemo, and you can kill all the surrounding cells, all the supporting cancer cells. You can see that tumor shrink down like this. But guess what? What you will have done quite often is not been able to kill this cancer stem cells. And that's why a lot of cancers come raging back, 1, 2, 3, or 4 years after chemo, and just grow rapidly, kill the patient, okay? So we really would like a way to kill the cancer stem cells, or to stop them from growing at least, okay? Quite often you'll have a relatively acidotic milieu, meaning tumor microenvironment, because a lot of cells are running on anaerobic glycolysis and then pumping out the end product of glycolysis, which is lactate plus a proton, pumping that into the extracellular space, which acidifies it. When you acidify the extracellular space, you suppress immune cells, okay? If you have high cortisol in your blood, you suppress the immune cells. You want your immune cells to work as good as possible, because your immune cells are what kills the cancer. Your immune cells are what gets the cancer out of your body. So you don't want an acidotic tumor milieu. You don't want high cortisol. You want to be mellow, chilled out, calm. because that lowers cortisol levels and your immune system works better. You want to minimize dietary salt, because the dietary salt will displace the sodium chloride. The chloride will displace some of the bicarbonate in your blood, which is a pH buffer, and thus make your blood and your extracellular, your matrix more acidotic, cause a low-grade metabolic acidosis, and that will suppress your immune system, okay? Guess what? You don't want to eat high-fat diets, because high-fat diets will suppress immune function, and obesity also suppresses immune function, and they weaken your ability of your immune cells to fight the cancer. So you don't want that, okay? These are things you need to know, because this is trench warfare. And you want the good guys, the immune cells and your normal neighbor cells, to be functioning well and to suppress the cancerous function. That's sort of the name of the game, really. Okay, and that's another thing, like Dr. Day is this famous lady doctor who survived metastatic breast cancer. She said, it is your immune cells that remove the cancer from your body. Chemo wipes out your immune cells. Why would you want to go down that path? Don't get me wrong, there are some cancers for which chemo has been shown to work well. If you've got one of those cancers, then in that case, it could be the best option for you. But a lot of cancers, it doesn't work so well. So don't just take it if you don't have a cancer that it's known to work well. Make sure that you read the numbers too. Your oncologist is just going to go by the protocol. And the protocols basically assume the patient's already dead, so you might as well give cancer a try. All right, so you need to know that. Here's a simplified description of what cancer does. So the simplified description is that, and this is sort of, the MTC, the mutation theory. Well, actually, no. This is the SMT, somatic mutation theory. This is what is taught in med schools. I actually think it's wrong. And believe me, not just me. Anybody who's read the literature thinks it's wrong. Somatic mutation theory. A chemical comes in, damages the DNA, causes a mutation in the DNA, and that leads the cell to replicate out of control. The reason why we don't think that's true is the Genome Atlas Project, the Cancer Genome Atlas Project. They don't show any consistent pattern of mutations, and you can have cancer with no mutations at all, okay? The metabolic theory of cancer, MTCs, makes much more sense. And there's even a new subtype of the metabolic theory of cancer called the fungal metabolic theory of cancer. And that might be right, but it still comes down to starting the cancer. That's called initiation. And then there's the question of whether the cancer will grow or not, and that's called tumor promotion. And then it'll metastasize and spread and kill the patient, all right? You can't change whether or not you had a tumor initiated, but the name of the game, the battle, is fought right here under tumor promotion. You can do a lot of things to slow down tumor promotion. Don't eat any animal protein. It has more methionine. It tends to cause accelerated tumor growth. Avoid estrogenic chemicals. Don't be iron overloaded. Avoid high-fat diets so you're not diabetic, increasing insulin-like growth factor. Another reason to avoid excess protein. Avoid things that suppress your immune system. Okay, there's a lot of stuff you could do. Your outcome is more dependent on you than it is on your doctor. Okay, one thing you need to know about is methionine. Methionine restriction can help, okay? Methionine is much higher in animal foods than it is in plant foods. So this is one of the reasons also to restrict animal protein. T. Colin Campbell, the guy who wrote the China study, a researcher of cancer and protein for many decades, world famous guy. His most famous book is China Study. I'm going to show you a picture of it in a moment. In rodents and animal studies, he could turn cancer on and off by avoiding animal protein. So you want to know that, okay? Amino acids are just like a string of beads on a necklace that make up proteins. Most of the work in your body is done by proteins. So here he is, the famous guy here. This is T. Colin Campbell. T. Colin Campbell right here. This is his book, The China Study. And in that book he found if you avoid all the animal protein, he could just turn the cancer off. And then you re-give animal protein. The more you give, the faster the cancer grows. Okay. Plant proteins coming from a single source did not accelerate cancer growth, but I have a little bit of a problem with that study. I'll tell you what I don't like. If you're only given one type of plant protein, you might be low in methionine or low in some other amino acids such that the tumor can't grow. But in real life, we don't eat just one source of plant protein. We eat a variety of them. So you want to minimize your total protein intake. I recommend you watch Dr. McDougall's lectures on cancer. Dr. McDougall was the best doctor in the world. He died just 2 years ago, a year and a half, 2 years ago. And he'll give you the best introductory lectures to cancer. Watch T. Colin Campbell, seeing how that if you avoid animal protein completely, 100%, at least in animal studies, that stopped cancer from growing in his research subjects, like with liver cancer. Okay, here's one of Dr. McDougall's great lectures on cancer, and he talks about the fact that by the time you can see cancer on an imaging test, like a CAT scan of the chest for lung cancer, CAT scan of the abdomen for pancreas cancer, for liver cancer, it's usually going to be at least 1 centimeter. Okay, and it's usually been growing at least 10 years by the time you can detect it on a CAT scan, an MRI, mammogram, or whatever. And by the time it's gotten to be 1 centimeter big, it almost always has metastatic disease already, if it really is cancer, if it really is a rabbit. Okay, if it's a turtle, it's not going to kill you anyways. If it's a vulture, you're already dead. So if it's a rabbit, it's probably metastatic. And what that means is your immune system is going to have to clear out those meds. Okay? So you want a good immune system. Now here's a lady that'll give you some hope. Her name is Kelly Turner, and she was working at one of these cancer centers out east. I think it was Memorial Sloan. I'm not sure about that. But anyways, she had a cancer patient who survived metastatic cancer, and she started asking him, well, what'd you do? And the patient told her a bunch of things they had done. She ran that by the cancer doctor, and the cancer doctor's like, it's just anecdotal. One patient, they just got lucky. It doesn't really matter what they say. And she's like, I don't know. So she started asking all these patients she could find that had survived metastatic cancer a prolonged amount of time. And she found that it fit a characteristic pattern. They tended to eat a primarily plant-based diet. They often exercised. They often had a good social support system. They often were religious. They took charge of their own cancer care. They found like a tumor marker in the blood they could go by, like PSA for prostate cancer, for example. And then they would change their behavior, change their diet, and see if their PSA would go down. If their PSA was going up, they'd ask themselves, what might I do being wrong? Try to change it, recheck their PSA in a couple months. So they were heavily involved in their cancer. They didn't just accept chemo, radiation, or surgery without thinking about it and reading about it extensively. Okay. So anyways, this is her main book, Radical Remission. She has another book called Radical Hope, a sequel to that, and then she's got some videos on YouTube. So she's a smart lady. She went around and read all these case reports on cancer survivors of metastatic cancer. She went and personally interviewed a bunch of them, so I think that's good. Nobody's going to go head-to-head with chemo. Chemo's a billion-dollar business, and it controls cancer. It's like the boss. It's the boss of the gang, okay? So it's always going to be the standard treatment of cancer. But you should know that it's good for some things, not so good for other things. Okay, this lady here, Ruth Heidrich, diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer in her 40s. She was in California at that time. She was told to make a will. She's going to die soon. They'll try chemo, but they weren't too optimistic. She said, no, I want to run a marathon. She went to Dr. McDougall, became a low-fat vegan, and she's still alive, over 45 years later. She's had her 90th birthday recently, okay? So the low-fat vegan diet and lots of exercise work well for her. She set like records in senior division of triathlons and marathons. Okay, now here's another interesting lady. This lady is Janet Murray here, and she had metastatic breast cancer. Again, told the same thing. We'll give you chemo, make a will. There's not much we could do for you. She liked running long distance, and her husband's a long distance runner. So she became a raw food vegan and stabilized her cancer, okay? And she's still alive 20 years later. To celebrate, after approximately 15 years, her and her husband ran a marathon every day, 365 marathons around the perimeter of Australia, just to show how healthy she was after being diagnosed with cancer. So she never got chemo because she felt for her type of breast cancer it didn't work so well, so she would rather take her chances of becoming a low-fat vegan. That's what she did, and she survived metastatic cancer. She's alive like 20 years later. Okay, now here's another famous lady. This lady, Dr. Day, she has diagnosed with metastatic cancer, breast cancer, told the same thing. Make a will, you're going to die, we'll try chemo, there's not much we could do. And she tried all the alternative therapies. She had, a lumpectomy initially and whatnot. But she started doing very poorly. Everyone thought she was going to die. And, then she kept learning about low-fat vegan diet, then about water filtration, about hydration. And she was very religious, and that lowered her stress level. She started juicing fruits and vegetables and making all these smoothies, okay? And she recovered her health. She was still alive. She died recently, about a year ago, when she was, 87 years old or something. But she survived her metastatic breast cancer for many years, for about 30 years, before she eventually died for other reasons. Okay, here's another one of her. So those are two of her books, Cancer Doesn't Scare Me Anymore, Drugs Never Cure Disease. And I had another book. Here's her other book, I Will Give You Back Your Health Again. And that's a pretty extraordinary book. I made a bunch of videos about that book. Okay, here's one thing I wanted you to see. This was relevant to what Dr. Day has to say. Here's a paper, Quantification of Cell Shedding into the Blood from Mammary Adenocarcinoma, from breast cancer. And basically, a 1-gram tumor, which is, smaller than a grape, all right? It will shed over 1 million cancer cells into the blood in one day. The only thing that's going to remove that is your immune system. You need your immune system. So that's like Dr. Day said. Your immune system is what cures the cancer, prevents it from growing and spreading. So be careful about wiping out your immune system with chemo. Chemo is like playing chicken. And what it tries to do is wipe out the cancer before it wipes out your immune system. And then, you turn off at the last minute like Rebel without a cause. And the problem is a lot of times it wipes out the immune system, and then the patient just does poorly or dies. I can tell you like a typical story. This is another friend of a friend type story. They come tell me, oh, this lady, she's got breast cancer, she's really smart, she's an MD, PhD, and do you have any advice for her? I said, yeah, sure, I'd be happy to talk to her. And they went back to the lady, and she's like, oh, no, I'm going to a specialist, Who is Dr. Rogers? I don't need to talk to him. I'm going to the best specialist. I'm like, oh, gee, yeah, I'm real impressed. So anyways, she went to the specialist. She got chemo. She had terrible complications. Dead the next year later. By the way, she's a beautiful lady. She's like a 9.5 out of 10 in beauty, okay? And she was young. Just 50, or in that ballpark of 50-ish, okay? Boom. Complication, dead. Okay? I can tell you about another breast cancer patient, another friend of a friend, and she went low-fat vegan, did all this stuff like those other ladies did. She's still alive 15 years later. So, the other one might have had a more aggressive tumor. This one didn't go to chemo, but you never know. There's never been a randomized control study, a low-fat vegan diet for cancer, and there never will be because there's no money in it. In order to fund one of these randomized control studies or any of these big controlled trials, you need tons and tons of money. Nobody's got the money. Nobody's going to invest that into a dietary therapy that's not profitable. So it's never going to happen. So no one's ever going to know. No one's ever going to know for certain which, if any, of these alternative cancer approaches works because there's no money in figuring it out. Okay, a good book to read. I recommend also, if you got cancer, you have a family reading program. If you're on your own, you're on your own. But if you got other people, a spouse, mother and father, kids, siblings, aunts, uncles, whoever, friends, you can all start reading the major books on cancer and then start talking to each other. Because you'll get ideas and you can accelerate your learning. Just watch the videos. There's usually videos about every famous book. There's usually a video about it. Not as good as a book, but it gets you in the game. Tripping Over the Truth by Travis Christofferson is a great book. The picture of a crab is crab means cancer. And what does he say? Cancer, this is the quote of Warburg. Cancer, above all other diseases, has countless secondary causes, but even for cancer, there is only one prime cause. Summarized in a few words, the prime cause of cancer is the replacement of the respiration of oxygen in normal body cells by a fermentation of sugar. So that's the Warburg effect. Basically, the cells switching from aerobic metabolism with oxygen in the mitochondria to anaerobic metabolism with glucose being burned without oxygen in the cell cytoplasm. Okay. All right, that's called fermentation of a sugar, is to make your ATP energy based on glycolysis, okay, with no oxygen involved. All right, so but he goes through the fact that the Genome Atlas Project, Cancer Genome Atlas Project, they all showed that you can't explain cancer by DNA mutations. It just doesn't do it. It doesn't work. The metabolic theory of cancer is what appears to be true, and then the subtype of the metabolic theory of cancer, which is the fungal infection metabolic theory of cancer, that might even be more true. Okay. Now, by the way, here's the book I previously wrote, Poor Man's Way to Fight Cancer, which goes through all these slides and helps you to explain everything. So I had some MDs who really liked that book. It's actually kind of simpler than most of my other books. Most of my other books are more advanced, but it's step by step through pictures. It's called a Cancer Picture Book. It explains all the physiology with pictures. Okay, now here is a big boy book. Okay, this is a pretty serious book. The author's name is Mark Lintern. This book came out in 2023. This is the best new book I've seen on cancer in many years since Travis Christofferson's Tripping Over the Truth. Travis Christofferson's Tripping Over the Truth also went over 3-bromopyruvate, which is interesting. This book right here, Cancer Resolution, is written by Mark Lintern, Cancer Reinterpreted Through Another Lens. What's good about the book? This guy has nothing to do with cancer. That's why the book is good. As Arthur Schopenhauer had said, the best books are always written by amateurs who just want to figure things out. The professionals almost always are a bunch of phonies that are just trying to do it for career advancement or to establish their expertise or something like that. And you have to think about it. If somebody works as a cancer doctor, if they are a radiation oncologist, they have to say radiation oncology is good or they'll get booted out of their profession. If they're an oncologist, they have to say chemo is good or they'll be booted out of the profession. Okay? If they're a surgeon, they have to say surgeon is good or they'll get booted out of the profession. They won't be allowed to stay if they criticize their own group. So they can never do that. They can never say something else is better or they'll be kicked out. So the reason why this book is so great is this guy was just a patient who had cancer, and his lady friend had cancer too, and she died, and he was sad, and he was pissed off, and he was scared. So he just devoted 8 years of his life to obsessive compulsive research of cancer, and he wrote a magnificent book. He does a great job of summarizing everything. I have a few little disagreements on the biochemistry, but it's a fantastic book. I just finished reading it. It's kind of a serious book, though. It's like about 450, 500 pages of serious discussion of cancer research. But it's good. And the conclusion he came to is that, yes, you've got mitochondrial dysfunction, but once a cell's injured, he believes that a fungal infection takes it over secondarily. And he makes a convincing case that that's right. He might be right, okay? And that's what's kind of funny. Here's this guy, he doesn't even have a medical degree, no doctorate, he works in design or something. He's just smart. And he read cancer with an open mind, trying to understand it. And he came to the conclusion that the metabolic theory of cancer is correct based on all the research, and that the cell is weakened and secondarily infected by a fungus that takes it over. And he calls his theory the cell suppression theory. So that's a subset, a subtype of the metabolic theory of cancer. And he makes very convincing arguments, okay? I think he's a little off on some of his diet things, but it's a book well worth reading. Okay, here's this guy Gerson, and he claims to have had good results with cancer. And he's basically considered verboten. Okay, you can't even go through his work, or the video could be removed. Okay. Just a couple quick words on cancer causation. Warburg showed you can cause cancer by making cells hypoxic. That means to deprive them of oxygen. And you can deprive cells of oxygen by feeding a high-fat diet, high-sodium diet, smoking tobacco, having atherosclerosis, having an infection causing inflammation, which causes cell swelling, which increases the distance between the target cell and the capillary such that it becomes hypoxic. Inflammatory foreign body reaction around something like asbestos, around an infection, inflammation, pushing the cell, making it farther from the capillary so it's hypoxic. Chronic inflammation, all the immune cells come in, they release all these cytokines, inflammatory, you get a lot of edema, increase the distance from the capillary, secondary fibrosis, hot disease, cold disease, ischemia, lack of oxygen to the mitochondria, mitochondrial dysfunction, cancer. Okay, that's a pretty standard way cancer happens. Like you ingest asbestosis, goes down into your lung, immune system forms a reaction to it, hot disease, inflammation, swelling, increased distance from the capillaries, hypoxia, secondary cancer, like a mesothelioma is the characteristic cancer of inflammation. Gastroesophageal reflux from abdominal pressure syndrome, the acid reflux irritating the esophagus, acute disease, esophagitis, immune system comes in, secondary fibrosis and scarring, entraps a normal cell, makes it hypoxic, mitochondrial injury, cancer. Hot disease, cold disease, cancer. Okay, there's tons of cancers all over the body that you can explain with that pattern. Hot disease, cold disease, cancer. So hot disease means acute inflammation, tissue swelling, edema. Edema means fluid swelling. Inflammatory signs are quite plain, redness, swelling, heat, and pain, which increases distance from capillary, which causes hypoxia. Then the fibroblasts come in and make a scar. That's like laying down collagen fibers, which increases distance from the capillaries, which increases hypoxia. Cell can, when a cell's hypoxic, it can switch over to anaerobic metabolism and become cancer. Okay, so that's the reason why hot disease leads to cold disease, leads to cancer. Here's Otto Warburg, German biochemist, Nobel Prize winner in 1931, figured out the Warburg effect. If you deprive cells of oxygen, some will die, some will revert to anaerobic metabolism, and some of those will lose control of their growth and become cancer. Okay. This is the work of Roy Swank. Eat a high-fat diet, your red blood cells all stick together. That's called blood sludge. It's also called rouleau formation, meaning stack of coins in French. When the blood cells are all stuck together, the red blood cells, they don't deliver oxygen well. You get a 15 to 20% drop in oxygen delivery to the tissues. Swank even measured a 30% drop in a hamster brain with this pattern. So high-fat diet does it. High-sodium diet will vasoconstrict. High fructose corn syrup will also vasoconstrict by inhibiting endothelial nitric oxide synthase. So that'll also cause a component of tissue hypoxia. And that, of course, can lead to cancer. PUFAs caused even more blood sludging than did saturated fats. Saturated fats from animal foods. PUFAs are typically your omega-6 oils. Okay. All right, now here is the big slide. I'll even take myself off for a second. You might want to print screen this. This is the big summary of everything you could want to know about what you can do to help yourself if you have cancer. Okay, first of all, you want to see if there's a blood test or a tumor marker test so you can follow it with the blood test, like a PSA, prostate-specific antigen for cancer. And you can see based on how you're doing if your cancer seems to be improving or getting worse. If you can't get a blood test marker, you might have to go with an imaging marker, meaning get a follow-up CAT scan, for example. I recommend, if you're newly diagnosed with cancer, try to take a year off from work at least. Because the most important thing is that you survive, and you're going to need time to read, to study, to lower your stress, to rearrange your life, your protocols, to make yourself healthier so your immune system functions better. Try to get off-the-record medical opinions. On the record, the doctor is obligated to say, this is the standard protocol, okay? You might try asking them, what would you do if it was you yourself or your mother or something, and that might get them to break out of the standard protocol. But under standard circumstances, they're obligated to give you the standard protocol, and that's what they're going to do. And that's not only what the billing companies, the insurance companies want, that's what the referral doctors expect. So an off-the-record thing is like if you have a friend who's a nurse, tell her to go ask the best doctor she knows what's the deal with some type of cancer or some other situation. Those opinions will be honest. They're the best ones. Okay, have a family reading program where get your father, mother, sister, brother, kids, and siblings to help read the books about cancer, watch the videos so you can learn fast, accelerate your learning, and talk about it. Study people who survive metastatic cancer from your cancer type. No caffeine. Caffeine's just like having psychological stress. Same thing with sleep deprivation. Elevates cortisol and catecholamines. So cortisol is going to suppress your immune system. You don't want that. Same thing with the catecholamines. You're going to drive up your blood lipids, drive up your blood pressure. You're going to be more atherogenic, more diabetic. That's going to suppress your immune system. You don't want that. You need to get your sleep. And you want to de-stress yourself. Avoid stress. That's why you want to take a year off from work. No caffeine. Exercise a lot, because when you exercise, your immune cells travel all over your body. Your immune cells work by Braille. They feel everything. So the more you exercise, the more they travel through your lymphatics. Lymphatic flow increases 10 to 30-fold. So you get much better surveillance of your entire body by your immune cells feeling everything to remove the cancer cells, to find them. They have to find them to remove them. The other thing is I think it's good to stay warm. I didn't see that in any books, but it just makes sense. Why do you get a fever when you have an infection? Because the immune system works better in a fever. So if you stay warm, your immune system works a little better and it can travel around the body faster. I think that's the case. Okay, I don't have a paper suggesting that, but just from common sense, from what I know, that seems to be correct. Okay. Also, when you exercise, what happens is then you're going to sleep better. You're going to have more sleep drive when your head lays down on the pillow and you go right into deep sleep for a prolonged amount of time. You also push the body into what's called the AMPK maintenance pathway rather than the mTOR activation growth pathway. So what that means is when you're exercising, you're going to use up a lot of energy, a lot of ATP. And afterwards, your cells are going to say, hey, we just exercised a lot. We are tired. We don't have enough energy to replicate, to grow. let us replenish our ATP stores. Then you go exercise tomorrow and you use up all that ATP, and your body's like, hey, no, I cannot grow today either. I'm too freaking tired. I need to replenish my ATP stores. ATP is adenosine triphosphate. It's like a $20 bill in a cell. So if your body keeps having to recover from exercise, it will keep on shutting off mTOR. mTOR is mammalian target of rapamycin, a nutrient sensing pathway that when it has all its ingredients and it has a lot of energy, it says you can replicate this cell. So you want to shut off replication by keeping your cells just tired enough that they say, you know, screw it. I ain't going to replicate today. I'm still freaking tired. I got to build up my ATP. Maybe tomorrow, but you work out that afternoon and then you're tired tomorrow. Maybe tomorrow. And you keep making it tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow so that the growth day never comes. Okay? And that's characteristic of people who survive metastatic cancer. They're exercising a lot. Okay, I don't think it's a coincidence that those two ladies who survived metastatic breast cancer are running marathons. Now, I'm not saying you should run a marathon. I actually think marathons are kind of crazy, okay? I'll walk, sometimes 7 miles on a treadmill because I'm reading a book. If I had to walk 7 miles on a treadmill without a book in my hand, I would go insane. So you need something to do. I think I'd be bored out of my freaking mind running triathlons or marathons, okay? But some people like that. But you have to watch out. You can run into electrolyte imbalances, water intoxication, all kinds of problems when you start going these super distances. Me personally, I wouldn't go farther than, a 10K, 6.2 miles. So it's up to the individual. So you figure out what's going to work for you. And you don't have to be an exercise maniac. You just need to do a reasonable amount of exercise for any individual, what works best for you. I like the treadmill because I like reading. Okay, I can walk on a treadmill 2 hours straight, and I can really concentrate good when I'm walking. The brain's activated when you're walking. Okay, get you some sunshine. Sunshine increases your vitamin D in a good way. It increases your nitric oxide, releases subcutaneous nitric oxide precursors, so you vasodilate, get better perfusion of your body. It improves mitochondrial function. It's thought that there's 4 phases of water. We know liquid phase. We know vapor phase. We know ice, the solid phase. But there's a 4th phase, the gel phase of water. And it's thought that the sunlight travels through your body and goes to the mitochondria in the space in the matrix around the ATP synthase, and it's thought to fluidize that, take it from a gel phase to a liquid phase and enable the ATP synthase to spin faster and make more energy. That's thought to be what's going on at this time. So it improves your energy function. Well, you want good mitochondrial function because the characteristic of cancer, not all cancers, but in general, it's thought that a lot of them have poor mitochondrial function. So you improve mitochondrial function, you might get all the cells in the tumor microenvironment, tumor milieu to function better. That might help, okay? Might get the surrounding cells to reassert their dominance over the cancer cell and impose growth control on it so it can't spread. Maintain social support. This helps lower your stress levels, avoid toxic people. I would say make a video about everything you want to say to your friends and family. Teach your kids family history. Depending on how old you are, if you're the grandmother, grandpa, make a video. Tell your kids their family history because a lot of kids, these modern kids in the modern world, they don't know anything. They're complete idiots. Kids should know the history of their parents, of their grandparents, their great-grandparents, as far back as you should go. It helps them to have a sense of who they are and what their ancestors achieved, and that motivates them, okay? My father was a real good athlete. My grandfather was 9 times national champion bicycle rider in Ireland, so there was kind of an attitude on me growing up, will I meet the achievements? My father was like a national boxing champion, so it was sort of like, my brother's a world champion athlete, so it was always a pressure on me. What are you going to do, pal? And I'm like, well, just give me a chance. And I was a pretty good athlete. I got injured, and that kind of messed my career up. But I always felt, to whom much is given, much is expected. You're expected to achieve, pal. And that was good. Because when you're pursuing achievement, you may or may not succeed in what you're trying to achieve, but it keeps you out of trouble, okay? Because I was wrestling, whenever the guys came by and say, hey, you want to go get drunk this weekend? I say, no, I got to train for a wrestling match, okay? No, I have to study. So that keeps you out of trouble, which is good. Okay, when you get sunshine in the daytime, you have better circadian rhythms that helps you to sleep better. Okay, like I wish, my parents and my grandparents had made videos or wrote, a book or something summarizing the family history better. I would have liked to know more because I learned useful things from that. It was good for me. Be religious. All major religions, the people are a lot healthier. Of course, I'm a Christian, Catholic. I think it's the best religion, but the religion, not the priests. I think they stink, the current priests, but I think the religion itself is great and did a lot of great things in the past. And all the people in the major religions, they're way healthier. You can look at the Harold Koenig books, for example, and for whatever the reason, maybe it's because it really lowers their stress, But that's good. That means it lowers your cortisol. Your immune system functions better. So those are the things that make your immune system function better. You get your exercise, you get your sleep, you avoid caffeine, you improve your sleep, and you avoid high-fat diets, and you avoid high-sodium diets. That's the key to good immune function, okay? And avoid high-fructose corn syrup. All right, avoid excessive simple sugars. Let's see, what's next? Have a strong purpose in your life. If you've got some strong burning purpose to live, that just builds this drive to live, and it makes you healthier. It makes your immune system function. Like if you say, if you're a coach, I want to be the best coach. If you're a teacher, I want to be the best teacher. If you're a parent, I want to be the best parent I can for my kids. Having that drive of something you need to do to get up in the morning, that sense of purpose makes you healthier. It just makes the body stronger, more resilient. Those people do better. Okay, if you're sitting around feeling sorry for yourself, oh, this chemo sucks, I'm so sad, that doesn't help you, okay? All right, eat 100% low-fat vegan. It has to be 100%. You don't tell a smoker, you smoke on the weekends. You don't tell a drinker, you can drink on the weekends. You tell them 100%. Because all animal protein increases cancer risk, as T. Colin Campbell has shown. So you want to be 100% vegan. And it should be low-fat vegan, because high-fat foods suppress the immune system, okay? No oil, not one drop. They're all bad for the immune system. They all increase risk of leaky gut. 100% organic. There's lots of toxins and pesticides and herbicides in non-organic food that are bad, and that can be damaging to your gut, to your immune system, etc. So it has to be 100% organic. You want to eat whole foods only, single ingredient only, because they can put stuff in the second ingredient and they don't have to tell you about it. And it's less processed. The more ingredients, the more processed the food is, the more crap is in it, the more toxins and contaminants that are in it. No animal protein, not one bite. You want to restrict methionine. I also say with your organic diet, no beans, because beans are like the highest protein animal food. They're like 30% protein typically. Okay, no dairy. Dairy counts as animal food. Consider juicing, because you can put lots of fruits and veggies into a blender to make a smoothie and eat that. That's just easier on your body and on yourself than eating them all. Don't get me wrong, I would just eat them. But most people are a little weak. Some people are kind of sick and debilitated. That's the fast way to do it. Wear earphones, because, like these things, ear protectors, because otherwise the blender's so loud you're going to go deaf. Okay? Now here is other things. Avoid EMF. You can have an EMF restrictor on your bed. You can switch your house out from Wi-Fi to hardwired. You can, like I said, put an EMF case around your bed to reduce EMF. You can buy machines to reduce EMF. You can put blockers around you to reduce EMF. But do something to reduce EMF. Electromotive force, okay? And don't hold your cell phone to your head. Use a speakerphone. Things like that, okay? Get a hardwire mouse. Here's my hardwire mouse. Can you see it? It's got a wire on it. It's not a Wi-Fi mouse. Whatever you can hardwire, it's better to hardwire stuff, okay? Measure the EMF in your house and see what you're being exposed to. We talked about minimizing dietary protein. If push came to shove and I had a patient who wasn't doing well, or I wasn't doing well, if it was me who had cancer, I would even consider taking out any dental amalgams, root canals, even maybe removing the tonsils if I thought they were maybe releasing bacterial endotoxins into the blood that were weakening my immune system and making me prothrombotic. Okay, now that's a little bit state-of-the-art advanced stuff, but there's a good reason why I say that. You can look up the work of Dr. Issels, and I'm not even that thrilled with Dr. Issels' work. I'm just saying it logically makes sense. Those, you got Hg toxin in your amalgams. That's what they're 50%, and that can weaken your immune system, okay? You got these thioether toxins coming out of root canals. So if you're doing great, forget about it. But if you're not doing great and you're looking for one more thing you could do, I would consider that. That's what I would do for myself. What else? You talk about minimizing dietary protein intake. You really don't need hardly any protein. I think all this stuff about old people need more protein is complete BS. In animal studies, the more you restrict protein, the longer the animal lives, okay? And you mainly get your physical strength from exercise, and we get way more than enough protein. It's impossible to be too low in protein, according to McDougall and Pritikin. And from my looking at it, I say the same thing. Kempner was feeding people next to nothing, okay? And he didn't even need to give essential amino acids, keto analog amino supplements at all, okay? You want to minimize your iron. You want to prevent iron overload. So I would check your serum ferritin level and try to keep it, let's say, 30 to 80. Okay, I'll when I go for a blood test at the lab, I'll have them toss a couple tubes. My serum ferritin, last time I checked, it's 110, so I want to continue to bring it down. I'd like to get it down below 80 based on the papers I've seen. forgot the name of the researcher at the moment. It was some Polish guy figured out that was best, and other people concurred it. I give previous lectures about that where I go through all that, including the papers. Leaky gut is prothrombotic. Avoid everything that causes leaky gut, which means no oils. Filter your tap water, no alcohol, no NSAIDs, no processed food. Hydrate with reverse osmosis water. Some people even say distilled water, but be careful that it can be too hypoosmolar and cause water intoxication. Gerald Pollack, the big researcher on the 4 phases of water, thinks that staying well hydrated builds easy water. It strengthens the glycocalyx, and that will improve immune function because it'll help prevent cancer from breaking across endothelial glycocalyx barriers. Excessive dietary sodium is bad. We talked about that. It can activate platelets, which can surround a cancer cell, metastasizing in the blood and hide it from the immune system. We talked about it causing a low-grade metabolic acidosis. Avoid fat, like we talked about. Avoid mitochondria inhibitors. I give an entire separate lectures on mitochondria inhibitors, like my lecture over at VegSource, and I found 120 of them. I'm like the world expert on recognizing all the types of mitochondria inhibitors and the roles they can play in disease. And they're bad, and there's tons of them, and they're real common, and they're common medicines too. So be serious about, do you really need the medicines if you're taking things like statins, metformin, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, antidepressants, tricyclic antidepressants, antipsychotics, antibiotics. Okay, there's tons of things. Heavy metals, aluminum, cadmium, also fluoride, okay, also Hg, mercury, also in these estrogenic chemicals. You want to avoid estrogenic chemicals. You can filter them out with your water. Avoid cosmetic products as much as you can. Be a minimalist, you know. You don't need deodorant. You really don't even need shampoo. You don't need dishwasher detergent. You don't need laundry detergent. You don't need any of this BS. I think it's best to stay away from soy and flax. The new research to me seems corporate funded and bogus. I wouldn't drink bottled water out of a plastic bottle. I don't want those microplastics potentially, make decrease in blood flow to tissue. I drink my water out of glass containers. Okay, some people are okay with stainless steel. So, anyways, I think that's my last slide. Let me see if I got anything else. Yep, that's it. So I went through a lot of stuff, and I hope this is helpful to you. Talk to your doctors, read your books, figure out what you're going to do, but don't just jump right into treatment until you're certain it's really the best thing to do, because the treatment can have irreversible side effects. Chemo, you can only take it usually for a limited amount of time because it's so toxic, and it'll always have some side effects, versus you just eat a low-fat vegan diet. There's no side effects from that, only good ones, and you can do it every single day, 24/7 for the rest of your life. So you get that ongoing benefits versus just playing chicken one time and hoping for the best. So study your cancer, see what it has a history of responding best to, study the survivors in your field, go through that checklist, make a print screen photo of it if you want. Well, anyways, I'm just telling you to learn from it. Talk to your doctor. I'm not your doctor. I'm just a YouTuber. What do I know? I'm not a cancer doctor. I don't treat any cancer patients. I just studied it. These are a couple things I found interesting. Maybe you'll find them interesting or helpful. Good luck to you.